Jeff,
Hi.
how are you?
Good, thanks, Brian. I promoted you to a panelist, so you're able to speak.
Appreciate that.
No problem.
Mike Lynch, I assume that we are all set to go.
Yes, whenever you're ready, we're recording. The room is open. You're good to go.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Okay, and I see we have a number of participants. Let me get things started. Good evening. Welcome to everyone. I'm Brian Walsh, Chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. And on behalf of the 11 members of the committee and our architect and others, we want to welcome you to tonight's session. I know that our town meeting members received an invitation from our town clerks, Susan Galvin. And tonight is really one of two webinar sessions that we're going to run. Tonight, and then a week from tonight, we're going to run a second. Tonight's focus is going to be on the design of the 3 new fire stations. And you can see those are kind of displayed, at least renderings of them on the screen. But we're going to get into a lot more detail about that. I have to tell you, we again, on behalf of the 11 members, we've done a lot of work. You know, we were authorized by our town moderator, Bob Hiss, back, and it seems hard to believe, but it's back in August of 2017. We've done a lot of work. We're really excited as to where we are. We think we have a strong message of 3 great fire stations. We think we have a strong financial message. We know we have a strong financial message. And the sessions that we're having both tonight and then next week are really designed for everyone in the town that's interested, but in particular to help provide town meeting members for an early education, if you will, because on February 22nd, we will be going to a special town meeting and we will be seeking approval to move forward with these designs and these financials. So a little bit of the ground rules tonight. It's more of a webinar style, so it's not an interactive question and answer per se. We'd like to allow Jeff to get through the complete design. He's going to be assisted by Alejandro Blanco or Blank. I'll let Jeff introduce him when. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Alejandro Blanco.
So when we're going to let Jeff and Alejandro get through this whole thing, and then what we're going to do is at the end, we'd like to then open it up, and you can start using it, the Q&A function as part of the webinar. We're going to have somebody monitoring those questions so that we'll be able to address those. But it's so it's not active, but we do want to hear if you have questions as it goes along. You'll have that ability to type them in, and then we'll certainly have every intention of addressing. So with that, and especially in respect to everybody's time, I would like to turn the meeting over. Great luck with Jeff. It's Jeff Shaw. He's the architect on the building, the fire station building project. We've been delighted with him, and I think you're going to find this a very interesting session. So no more delay, Jeff. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. So our team at Context Architecture, including all of our consultants, engineers, and designers, have been working closely with this town as we've worked through a couple of very detailed phases of the project. As a background, we have been working with the town for quite a while. We got involved after the initial studies were done to determine exactly which fire stations and in which areas of town they would be going. So the mandate to us and the committee as it currently exists is to develop fire stations for Atherton, East Milton, and the headquarters. Our first task was to work through the programming of the stations, which meant that we needed to figure out exactly what the space needs requirements were in each of the stations. A prior study had identified a certain amount of space for each of those stations, and our task was to vet that and confirm that those space needs were adequate. So here are the 3 stations. I'm sure you are well familiar with Milton. Just wanted to remind you where we'd be working: Atherton headquarters and East Milton. And there's good rationale for maintaining those locations for response time. Each station has its own unique components, but generally the overview for programming was that at the headquarters station, we'd end up with a building roughly 20,000 square feet. It includes the fire administration, which is about 1,500 square feet. And it has an apparatus room housed for 5 bays to house a lot of the equipment and frontline as well as reserve apparatus that the town currently maintains. At Atherton Station, I should say, a station of roughly 6,000 square feet with the potential for either reusing the 2 existing bays and potentially adding 1 new bay, the new bay being the one for a modern apparatus engine. And at East Milton, the program called for, again, just under 6,000 square feet with 1 new bay for an engine. The program process included a very detailed review of the existing conditions of the stations, how the departments currently operated, and what equipment and personnel that they had, as well as comparisons to new fire stations and standard fire stations for space needs requirements that are currently being used in many other facilities as well as nationwide. We compared these standards with the department's earlier study and developed 1 sheet of paper for each room for every single station for the entire program. These are some examples here. It incorporates all of the furnishings requirements, all of the equipment requirements, all the vehicle requirements. So we make sure that each space in the building is adequately sized to house only what is necessary for the need. That need also looks out between 30 and 40 years into the future of potential growth in the department, as well as growth of vehicles and other components that would be necessary to be housed at the station. After doing all of that and compiling the numbers as we have, we then understand the exact requirements and then get into the design of the stations. One of the key goals of the building committee and the town, as well as our design team, is to create sustainable and energy efficient facilities. Decision was made early on that these facilities would be carbon neutral, essentially requiring an all electric building design so that they could be potentially powered in part by photovoltaics or other renewable resources. The town could also participate in purchasing programs where you purchase green power to power the buildings, but we wouldn't be using any fossil fuels on site, which includes the ranges at the fire station kitchens. We'd be targeting an EUI goal of 100, which is an energy use intensity goal of 100. For public safety, it's quite ambitious because the national average for public safety is 125. Obviously, the goal is to reduce this as close to 0 as possible, but with a 24/7, 365 facility, it's challenging to get there. We're also targeting a LEED Silver rating for the building. As I mentioned before, solar panels are being considered for the roofs of most of the buildings and potentially ground-mounted solar panels where it's appropriate. The design of the building envelope and the windows, doors, and other components that go into the building will be based on high-performance design, heavily insulated with robust air barriers. Included in the construction and design process is commissioning of the building, including the building enclosure, which means we're going to be doing testing while the building is being constructed to confirm the materials and the construction techniques are passing standards and requirements for air tightness, which will help the building enclosure be super efficient and really reduce ongoing operations costs. And to round out the sustainability goals, we are trying to eliminate any use of toxic materials, including so-called red list materials, to try to ease them out of the industry, but definitely create a building that's very healthy. So I'm going to go through each of the three stations. First with headquarters. We have a site that's located right next to the existing headquarters. The site will also include the existing municipal parking lot, which is next to headquarters, and it will include a small renovation and reconfiguration of the existing headquarters building. This is the site plan, as you can see here, and in a second we'll show you how the phasing will work when the new building is constructed next to the existing building. But in broad strokes, we'll have to remove the former addition to the headquarters building, renovate the first floor of the headquarters building into a training room, which will be available to the public as well, similar to how other conference rooms facilities are available by being booked in town. And the fire station will be created to the left. Prior to all of this, a new public parking lot would be created to the right of the station, which would help mitigate the loss of the public parking on the left. Sum total is an increase in parking in this area of about a half dozen parking spots. We worked very closely with the neighborhood during the design of this project so that the exterior design and the massing and the configuration of the site works well with the neighborhood's concerns. And to date, we've heard a very encouraging response. The building plans include first floor, which is most of the apparatus functionality and all of the administration, as well as the training room in the existing headquarters. And then on the second floor, we have loft space for additional storage and training for the firefighters, as well as living quarters for the firefighters. These are the renderings, as you saw at the beginning, of the front of the station, which you can see just behind Town Hall, next to the original headquarters building, which retains its original massing. And then at the rear of the station, facing the neighborhood. The design of the building is intended to really reflect the needs of public safety, but also recognize that it's a very visible and important component within the town. Here's a small video, short video that will show you how the phasing will operate as the building goes under construction. There's a few specific components that we need to point out. First of all, at the headquarters, the existing lot next to the station will become part of the future building. So the first step is to take over the land to the right of the station, as you can see here, and build a new 36-spot parking lot. During the second phase of the construction, we'll be largely constructing the building itself. As you can see it fly in, the entirety of the building will be constructed in this phase, as well as the aprons and the back rear egress. The fire department would move in, and then a new phase would begin where we would renovate the original building and also demolish the 1980s addition to create a new entryway to the original, or to the new fire station. The materials of the building include a lot of materials that are found in the nearby neighborhood. We're actually bringing in some of the design elements and materials that are in the neighborhood, including brick, wood, and use of metal. A lot of design effort was put into the apparatus garage so that it's very visible to the public for what's going on in this building. And a lot of the design cues for the windows and other areas of the building take on aspects of the neighboring buildings. At Atherton Station, we went through a lot of different efforts to determine what the right configuration was for a new building. We looked at a separate building further down the hill. We looked at building a new building close to the existing station, but not attached to it. And we looked at removing the existing handsome fire station. At the end of the day, the most cost-effective way, and in fact, we think the best way to honor the Atherton Fire Station is to make an addition to the building, which you can see here as an L shape around the back. This has a couple of benefits. Primarily, the main benefit is to create a new apparatus garage for a modern fire engine, which is much heavier and bigger that can fit in the existing building. We also then had to create modern crew quarters on the second floor and all of the space necessary for decontamination and gear storage on the main level, as well as a fitness room on the lower level. Here's a rendering of what it could look like with the new addition off to the side of the building. The materials of this building are very unique to the existing structures, so the new addition tries to pay homage to that, including the use of cedar shakes and the stone veneer that is similar to the existing stone. We'd also be restoring and renovating the existing building so that the facades, the roof materials, and everything would be brought back up into good conditions. At East Milton, we're proposing a new site next to St. Agatha's. This is on Adams Street, and it's ideally suited to a fire station, considering the access it has to traffic, both going in both directions, and the proximity to the existing neighborhood. The building itself is very compact. It has one engine bay, minimal crew quarters, as well as appropriate space for storage for all of the apparatus equipment. And here's a rendering of what that might look like next to the rectory of the church. Materials here would be similar to the headquarters building, with the additional use of some black masonry veneer, as well as red brick masonry veneer. This design was intended to keep with a lot of the same design cues that were happening at the headquarters station, so that the pair of these buildings would look like they belong together in Milton. Thank you for listening to the presentation. I'm happy to take any of your questions. If you would please use the Q&A feature to type them in. We'd be happy to answer any of them as they came up. It's been an exciting time for the town as we've managed to fit each one of these stations into the neighborhoods that they exist in and find the best possible use for the buildings.
Thank you, Jeff. And listen, while we wait to see if we're going to be getting some questions, I'd like to add a few more points of interest here. I mean, first, by the way, I neglected to thank Michael Lynch and Milton Access DV for hosting this webinar, and they've been a terrific help to us along the way. It's a great, valuable resource for the town, and I thank Mike. Also, for those that have joined us in the call, you should know that we do have our Milton's Fire Chief, Chris Madden, is with us. He's on the call tonight. Chris has been a big help as we work on these designs, as well as actually when we started the previous Fire Chief, Jack Grant. I believe they've worked extremely well with us. I think we've worked well with them. Some of the things that aren't obvious, there's so much that we could share, and we don't want to just gobble up time. But, you know, two of these three stations that we are going to build or replace are more than 100 years old. They were built actually to accommodate horse-drawn. Actually, one of them was built to accommodate a firefighter-drawn wagon. In fact, the town is lucky enough to still have that. I think we're storing it on Atherton Street. But the point is, whether it was a firefighter-pulled apparatus or a horse-drawn apparatus, you know, those had significantly different size requirements and considerations, and yet we're still using those same buildings that have been adapted and pushed to their limits over the course of more than 100 years. The third fire station down in East Milton was built in the 50s, and it's on a very small pond, so it doesn't accommodate well to rebuild and reconstruct. In fact, we did a deep dive to see if we could do that. We determined that we just didn't have enough of the right space to work with, and if we did, I think anyone on the call would recognize, you know, that location has become one of the more traffic congested locations in the town. We have several of those, but whether you're talking about a couple of hours around the morning rush or a couple of hours around the evening rush, there are times when there's so much traffic out there that to get a fire station out, and by the way, 70 to 75% of the district that that station covers is on the Milton side of the expressway. Just to get that truck out and around and through that traffic, and even with minimal traffic, and over to where the East Middle Post Office is, which is a short line of sight, you take more than a minute, and more than a minute on such a small run is not acceptable when you realize that our requirements to try to get to 90% of the homes in the town and 4 minutes or less. That's a fire standard. And in fact, those standards are based on a lot of things, but the burn rate of the typical homes that are built today have increased dramatically. And so, if anything, we have to be better. So that wasn't the best site. Just want to share with the community. We looked at some 15 different sites for a location for that East Milton Fire Station. We did a lot of work on it, and we were happy. We put out an RFP that had St. Agatha's Parish respond to it with a parcel of land that really could serve the town extremely well. It's on a main street, so the fire engine could come out and turn left or turn right. It could quickly take a right and another right on Squantum Street to gain access to the Quincy side of its district, and quickly gain access, much more quickly gain access to the majority of its district on the Milton side. That the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, has been negotiating a very favorable position for our town with the parish. My understanding is it's really close to being completed, and we're hoping that maybe even by next week we'll be able to provide more detail on that. So there is a lot going on. And then lastly, I want to mention before we look at what we might have waiting for questions, and it looks to me like we have 5. We have worked on, we've been very fortunate. Members has a daughter that's professionally produces TV programs and news programs. She has volunteered that her effort. That's Jean Sullivan is the member in our committee. His daughter Ann has volunteered her effort to put together a really nice video. It's about 8 minutes in length. We're going to have it on our website. We try to make it get there, but we will have it on our website within this week or by early next week. And in 8 minutes, it really shows all the things that you need to worry about. The current conditions that we have, which you just see all of the problems: health, safety, ability for firefighters to do their job. And then we also blended in a recently completed station and their fire chief pointing out, and you get to see the advantages of these new buildings. So again, sorry, just wanted to add a few more minutes of overflow. And Jeff, how are we going to attack these questions?
So we've got 7 questions, which is not too many. So I think I can just read them off here, and we'll just go one by one through the questions we've got. So people can still feel free to send in questions as we go. I'm going to start at the top of the list here, the earliest question. So the first question is, would the East Milton station require installation of a traffic light on Adams Street? And how will use of sirens be controlled to not create a noisy situation? Can vehicles travel with sirens turned off? So Brian, I'll jump in here. I think that the plan is to have a traffic signal at the station itself and only be used when the trucks need to come out. Typically, the trucks don't run with the sirens on unless they're required to get through traffic. So the amount of noise shouldn't be anything more than what had been there before, because the traffic light will operate. They'll be able to get through the traffic without the sirens, and they'll have the lights on, usually in the daytime and when they're running in an emergency. So the noise issue really isn't going to be any more than what noise is currently there when the engines are potentially running into traffic situations.
Yeah, if I could add, because it's a fully expected question. I think the average person that does not live close to a fire station immediately starts thinking about, oh, my experience with the fire department is when I hear a large fire truck nearby, trying to get quickly to a fire and is leaning on their horn. So just so you know, first of all, the average calls that station would handle is in the neighborhood of a day. And we worked a lot with the Milton Center Neighborhood Association. They comprise a large group, and they started working with us from day one. They live right in behind the headquarters. And I'll tell you, they will be the first to tell anyone that might be here now a new station, East Milton, that the Milton firefighters are good neighbors. They're very careful. If it's a middle of the night, late at night, early morning, they're not going to come rolling out of their station, leaning heavily on the horn. They might not use it at all if they don't need it. Less traffic at that point. Lights are there. So the number of calls are significantly less. The amount of times you're going to hear their fire engine horns is going to be much more significantly less. And I think if you were to know some of the neighbors up there that behind Town Hall, or even neighbors of Atherton Street today, you would find that it's not the understandable knee-jerk reaction just doesn't turn out to be true, and they're a great asset to have in the neighborhood. And certainly, if you have the need, and firefighters today have a lot more of a role than just being able to get to your house and put out a fire. They have a lot of emergency services they provide. And if you have their need, you're going to find it's rather nice and convenient to have them there near your neighborhood.
Brian, next question is, will any of the new stations have EV capacity and/or solar? Do we imagine that the firefighting fleet will go electric over time? Yes, all 3 stations are planned to have, PV, photovoltaic panels. The plans are in the works for determining whether electric vehicle charging stations would be required at any of the stations. It's not challenging to install them. And so as part of the next phase of design, we'd be looking at that component. There has been a discussion in the industry about electric vehicles and firefighting. It is an interesting thing. These vehicles are extremely heavy, filled with water and lots of gear and very large ladders. So it is a little impractical now with battery technology the way it is, that the fire trucks would be going electric anytime soon. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that eventually that could happen. The expectation is at that point, there would need to be an intervention made because technology would be probably quite a bit different than what we have today. So making provisions for that today probably wouldn't lead the town in a good direction.
And Jeff, if I could add, one of the advantages of photovoltaic cells or solar is, once you take on the cost and add them, they freeze that cost of electricity that they provide. All of us know as homeowners that you have, your electric rates just keep going up. And whatever advantage we can get to lowering the electric rate for fire stations, that just becomes a growing savings over the years. And I've had panels on my roof for several years, and it's just terrific that it grows in that price, and and then of course it has all those other environmental advantages that you take advantage of that free energy. So just wanted to add that thought.
Brian, the next question is, could we address the data points that support the need for 3 fire stations in Milton?
Great question. Let me take that on.
Sure.
So a couple of the things, and we have time so we can go into this a little bit more. A few of the things that we tackled, we as the Fire Station Building Committee, right when we started, we recognized that we could probably work around the existing Atherton Street station. And we could probably work around the existing headquarters station. We recognized the East Milton station might be more difficult. And so we decided that it was important to do 2 deep dives. which we did, and we have full reports on our website that'll give you a lot more detail. The first deep dive was to say, look, could we provide adequate fire service to all of the residents of the town of Milton with just 2 stations? And it, obviously, if we were then, challenged with building just 2 stations, the economics would be better than 3. Well, the first question is, where would you locate them? And again, there's requirements to make sure that as that fire truck leaves the station, that it can reach all of the addresses, 90% of them, within 4 minutes. So what we did is we used a program looking at the entire town and said, okay, forget what happens to be located at that particular piece of property, whether it's privately owned, publicly owned, used, or not used. What sites could we locate 2 stations to provide coverage to the entire town? Again, there's a full report on our website on this. And what happened was it identified a site that was really, one of the 2 sites really close to the Atherton Street station. The second station would have to be located, it's sort of diagonally across the street from the existing Pond Academy. It's a corner that is currently, it actually has a memorial to one of our former congressmen on it. There's a flagpole, and there's a gentleman that maintains a memorial, does a terrific job down there. They identified that right near that location would be a suitable spot. So we met with the library trustees who owned that property, began a dialogue about whether they would be willing to allow us to purchase the property or provide some sort of a land transfer or whatever. And they were more than willing to have that dialogue with us. And we did we used computer programs, but we just did a quick analysis. Would that work? And it kind of looked like it would, meaning we could reach 90% of the residences within 4 minutes. But it was real close. And so we did what we thought that was the responsible thing. We had some startup money, and we used a small amount of that and hired a professional firm that does this. And their analysis came back and showed us that it really wouldn't. We couldn't reach 90%. In fact, we took 5 years of actual call history, all of the responses that the Milton Fire Department had to use, and they mapped that. And they found out we had some 185 calls in that group that now we would not get there in an acceptable period of time. So, and then when you realize there are parts of the town, even though we're extremely well built up, there still are parts of the town that are a little further out that aren't completely built up. There are parts of the town where today it might be a couple of small residences that might have a larger, small apartment, a condo building complex that might add to the number of places that would be in the outskirts. And so we tried our best, but we determined that we could not provide, and keep in mind, I've mentioned that the 2 of the 3 stations we have are more than 100 years old. We don't know when the next time the town will be in a position to kind of rebuild their fire stations, but we would know that the town will be dramatically different 50, 100 years. There'll be less space available and less opportunity. We just couldn't do it now. We did try, and we have that full report on the website. So I think that was Jeff, that was the basic question. Could we do it with less than 3?
That's right. Yep. Thanks. Okay, a whole bunch more have come in. So next one is, what is the estimated yearly cost to the town for the land agreement with the Archdiocese?
So I mentioned earlier that the select board is currently negotiating with the Archdiocese, and as such, negotiations are underway. It's a confidential. The select board has their perspective. I'm sure the Archdiocese. We're highly confident that we're going to have an attractive solution. And let me put some parameters around that to make you feel comfortable about that as well. even though the current East Milton Fire Station is an extremely small spot and not suitable for us to build a replacement fire station, that smaller parcel of land is extremely valuable in a commercial zone, in the commercial zone in our town. We had one of the members of our board is one of the world's largest real estate firms in analysis, and we come up with an estimate of that property being worth in the neighborhood of $1 million. Select board members will tell you they've been approached many times. Anytime people think that that land might become available, they've been approached by banks and others that would be hotly interested in that. So at the end of the day, we're confident that for the town, and this is a town issue in terms of us relative to this land swap, we're confident that that property of the existing fire station is more valuable, and they'll gain more from that than what we'll have to work out with the Archdiocese for the half acre for the new station. That's about, and so it's a very, we're expecting a very favorable position, and that's about as much as I can say now, but stay tuned. We're only within 1 or 2 weeks of having more public information on that.
Great. Brian, another question about traffic in St. Agatha's site. So this question is, how will the move to St. Agatha's impact traffic to the western side of Adams Street? And how will impact the neighborhood behind St. Agatha's? Will there be more traffic lights needed there? And I think the analysis that's been done to date, because of the routes that the trucks will take on Adams Street, there should not need to be any additional traffic signals beyond the one that's proposed or will be proposed for in front of the fire station, because the fire station will not drive a lot of traffic to the area. There really won't be any added traffic in the neighborhood. There definitely won't be any in the neighborhood behind the station, but even on Adams Street, there should not be additional traffic. Remember, the vehicles travel this way anyways on their calls in this neighborhood, or to get to this side of the neighborhood. There will only be the additional calls going to the other side of the deck, and those are pretty rapidly responded to by this location. Brian?
In fact, if I to that, Jeff, another way to think about this, the fire trucks coming out of that new location, they are only going to go to the same addresses that require fire service as they would go to the other location. The neighbor behind, the only time you would see the fire trucks will not be using small size streets behind that location unless they're going to a service call day. But other than that, they're going to stay on the main roads, which is where you want your fire trucks to stay. They typically will use main roads to get to where they only have to turn to a smaller side road that really requires that service. And again, the width of the street in front of that location is extremely wide. So it's very, and it goes in both directions. So it's very complementary. So again, yeah, I think.
So the next question is, speaking to the allowance and the design for future growth, can you expound on the features of each station that will achieve the future potential needed capacity? It's a great question because it has to do with the design of just about any building that we would work on, including public safety type facilities. And in fire stations in particular, we're looking at the nature of the profession and how much it's changed over the last 30 years. There's a lot more requirements for professional degrees and additional training. So definitely incorporating training features into the building was one area to accommodate future growth. Definitely a classroom type training facility, which, as I said before, is going to be located on the first floor of the original fire station, be about a 30 or so person room. And the station itself has additional training features. We've also provided a wellness center in the station to make sure that firefighter health and safety are taken care of, which is a huge and growing need in the fire department. I'm sure many of you probably heard of firefighter cancer rates and the increased issues there surrounding their exposure to toxins and carcinogens. And in particular, when it comes to the design of the station, really planning out the future capacity of the building itself, it weighs into that. We have to determine exactly how many firefighter dorm rooms should be built so that we're not building too much space that the town won't ever use, but also try to accommodate so that in the future, any additional crews or additional missions that are added onto the fire department can be accommodated with staff quarters. So we think we've hit the right spot for all three stations. They have the ability in an emergency to actually double up the crew, a snow emergency or some other issue where you need to bring additional firefighters to the station just to give crews a relief, and may want to hold them overnight so they are there for another shift in the morning. That way the station itself can actually support twice the number of firefighters that are currently planned for each room. In addition, the vehicle bays themselves have space for additional equipment. Over time, the town replaces its fleet, and fire trucks design just like your cars. They don't stop getting newer features that help the firefighters do their work. And those trucks get bigger, often heavier or longer, more features on them. And so having the space in the apparatus garage for these additional pieces while still maintaining reserves that are needed in the case of a frontline piece going down, or specialty equipment like trailers, light trailers, hazardous materials trailers, other things like that needed in the station. So all of that was taken into account and in the design of all three stations, and we made sure that there was sufficient space to the best of our ability. Of course, nobody can tell the future. We don't have a crystal ball, and we're just doing the best with what we have based upon our experience and what has happened in the past. The next question is about the health and well-being of firefighters using proper laundry and air exchange mechanisms to reducing cancer reduction. And as I was hinting at in the last question, we have in the stations developed a program around that specifically for firefighter health and safety. The vehicles that they travel in need to be washed down properly. The gear that they wear needs to be washed properly, and all the devices and equipment they use need to be washed properly. That equipment has a home in each of these stations for doing that washing and treating the equipment, as well as a sequence of rooms that firefighters would go through after they came back from a call, where they would take off their gear, have that gear laundered, as well as go through a decontamination shower and basically clean themselves, be able to change into clean station wear clothing, and be able to then go about their business. In addition to that, we've toured several facilities recently that have gone and brought in more cutting edge technology like steam cleansing showers, which help to open up the pores and release a lot of the toxins, as well as detoxifying chambers that are used when the firefighters come back on their next shift to try to help get more of those particulates out of their system. So those components are being added into the project so that we can really have a state-of-the-art healthy facility for the firefighters. It's definitely a focus of the committee and our firm as well. I'm going to come back to the traffic light situation again. The next question is about the traffic light at the East Milton station. And the question is this in addition to the one approved at town meeting a few years ago at Adams and West Squantum? Brian, I don't know if you can pick up that.
Yeah, so I apologize, distracted. Could you read the question?
Yes, it has to do with the East Milton station and the traffic light in front of the station being the same as the traffic light that's been proposed at town meeting a few years ago at Adams and West Squantum. And I think I know the answer, but I want you to maybe go after this one.
Yeah, sure. So there is a, as I think everybody in town knows, there's a whole effort going on right now, a reconstruction of that whole East Milton deck. And I know there are plans, part of that, to change some of the lighting there. I can't say that I know the specific details, but I do know there are changes planned there that are, you know, not to us, and certainly as we plan to not be there that hopefully that much longer.
Right. The next question is, would construction and alterations of all three sites occur at the same time?
So Jeff, would you like me to take a shot at that?
Well, I know what my answer would be, but why don't you give yours?
So the first thing, folks, and there's a big advantage, we think, for the town in terms of cost to bid all three projects out together. And it's not likely that we would be building all three at the same time. We know that the priority is to deal with the headquarters station first. And then, you know, at some point we would tackle on another one of the substations, likely, and then likely East Milton. But, you know, it has to do with the ability for the contractors that we select, what they're able to do, and but it's just not likely we'd be doing three at the same time. I guess maybe Jeff, you could add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definite financial advantages to building three stations at the same time, but there are also complexities and risks. It's not like you're building three buildings on one site. They are three separate sites spread around town. The contractors that will be involved would have to provide staff for all three. The advantages, of course, is that, you know, certainly the procurement of materials and the resources could be done in such a way that there's a advantage for pricing. You know, it certainly could be the case that the fire department can work closely with the contractor to make sure that they have the appropriate resources at each station and can move things around to allow fire department to operate continuously while the stations are being constructed. Gives us some flexibility on the project. Ultimately, it does boil down to the cash flow and building out the stations in a way that the town can support financially. So it's a complicated puzzle, and I don't think that the answer is complete yet. It will be something that the next phase of design will answer that question as to what the town prefers to do. But both options are on the table, and the pluses and minuses have been weighed, and as they will continue to be. Brian, the next question is, what % of the fire department responses are to non-fire emergencies? It seems that electric cars or trucks would be ideal for quick, eco-friendly responses to non-fires. I'm not aware of the exact percentage. I know, unless Brian, you are, I know that it is, you know, particular to each department. In general, in the firefighting industry, there's quite a bit more non-fire emergencies, so medical calls, which the fire department responds to, in addition to the police and the ambulances. But yes, as I was saying before, in terms of electric vehicles, the smaller and lighter the vehicle, the more ideal it's suited to EV technology. But consider that even ambulances are pretty heavy and have a lot of equipment on it. I'm not quite sure when Elon Musk and all the other folks building these electric cars will turn their attention to public safety, but I do know that there are companies working on heavier vehicles for EV, and I know it's coming at some point. It's just not around the corner, so not something that we would ideally plan for necessarily in terms of the electric infrastructure in the building, because by the time that happens, the technology will probably be different. While I understand East Milton Station was likely going to be located on the other side of the highway, can you share what the estimated impact to response time to the Quincy side of Milton from its current location? And Brian, I think you really sort of expounded on that earlier. I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jeff. So we are very confident that the Senega property site will help us to continue to provide a speedy response to all of for the residents that are within Milton Fire District on, for lack of a better phrase, the Quincy side of the expressway, rather than coming out in a potentially clogged area right in front of in East Milton Square and going down, traveling down a little narrower street, which is Adams Street from the fire station down towards Lakin Square. You know, they would pull out quickly to the main road, take a right on West Squantum, and be able to really feed into a lot of the streets, depending on the address they have to go to, pretty from that direction. So we have, again, we have all of the calls, data history with that, and we're fully confident we're going to continue to provide great, fast response.
Okay, Brian, how will the current part of the headquarters fire station that will not be used as part of the new fire station be used, which I believe is referring to the second floor of the existing fire headquarters?
Yeah. So good question. What we are going to, one of the needs of the Milton Fire Department that has been sorely met, and there are many, the current buildings, is having an adequate large conference room for training sessions and discussions. And so we are going to have a conference room that's not going to be exclusively for the firefighters. It'll also be shared for town use, and we would envision, you know, with the town hall as it's, you know, walk across the small street there, having a need to use that. And then it's really, there's other space in the second floor. It's really the purview of the select board as to what ultimately they would do. We're going to make sure and think it's appropriate as part of the fire station project and budget to build that training room and bring that up to speed. But again, some of the other parts of the building become more the purview of the select board.
A question about East Milton and working with the neighbors on their concerns. The direct neighbors of St. Agatha have not been involved so far in these discussions. Were there sessions?
So we will, I guess, let's take a shot at that. We have had some sessions, St. Agatha hosted some sessions. When it's one of these difficult situations, which is we think it's a great spot. The St. Agatha's is comfortable with it, or they wouldn't be negotiating with us. But are there some neighbors to be affected? Yes. There's always going to be some neighbors that are affected whenever you locate a fire station in a new location. We think that's really minimal because there's a lot of space in Agatha's property that's directly behind the fire station, and the Adams Street in front of the fire station is so large, it's not as dramatic an impact of the few homes that are directly across the street. But the simple answer is, once we know it's a go, we will be building sessions, and we will be communicating the more direct neighbors there, so that we can make small design changes and accommodations to make that station a better neighbor for those neighbors.
Another question about East Milton. Any considerations for a police presence? And it's a fire station building committee, so I'm not sure if police came up in the committee, Brian, but I don't know if the town had any considerations prior to this project for that.
I could say, so it's sort of interesting because, you know, the challenge for a fire department, and then we've mentioned a few times in this call, is you've got to get to those residents within a short period of time, because it's often a quick moving emergency. And you don't drive the streets with these big heavy fire trucks loaded with water. And by the way, fire trucks, contrary to popular belief, they're driving around the streets at speed limit speeds. They don't rush the way a police cruiser might. They just can't. The geometry is such. So with so much water, you can't make a quick corner and you can't stop as quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So they maintain a much slower pace. But that requires fire departments to have, they're dispersed geographically around a town that they're covering. The police department, their on-duty are, and think about, we call them cruisers. They're out cruising around the town. I don't know. I am certain that our police chief could adequately answer this. I don't know what they use, but they only have one station in the center of town where they do have a lot of room, but they constantly have cruises that are going downtown. We had no discussions about locating any of those cruises at the fire station, and there's none at the current East Milton Fire Station.
Okay, Brian, last question that we have so far. The Governor's Road has become a cut through with the designation, I believe this is East Milton again, with the designation of one way on Rose Street. Are you guaranteeing that the trucks will not come up Governor's Road? It's tempting to come straight across Adams up through Governor's to hit the brook, The congestion in this area during school days and Saturday afternoon, evening is as worse as East Milton Square.
Yeah, so the fire department is going to let the call or the situation dictate how they get to that, in the quickest or shortest amount of time. So that always sort of generates having them main roads that are not congested are problems. So I would not anticipate that they're not going to just take a route because they think it's kind of convenient or quick. They're going to stick to the main streets and stick to the streets that provide the quickest access to their destination.
Yeah, that's absolutely the way that fire department operates. They operate on main roads. They don't take shortcuts. They don't go down narrow streets. They want to make sure everything's safe. So Brian, I think we've hit all of the questions. If anyone else out there has a question they feel like wasn't answered or wants to ask a new one, I think we'll hang out for a bit and see if anything else comes in. Other than that, I think we've hit them all.
Terrific. Well, I guess in a wrap up, and by the way, the Fire Station Building Committee, we have our own website. At any time, submit questions to there. We're monitoring that constantly. We provide more information. We have another session a week from tonight where we're going to focus more on the budgeting requirements and the funding mechanisms. We have a very interesting and good story to share with you in terms of how these fire stations get funded and to avoid tax increases to the residents of Milton. So hope you can join. If you're able to join us tonight, I hope this hit the mark. I hope you can join us in a week from tonight. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be providing a really nice, about 7-minute video that if you can get on the website, that should be up there, hopefully by the end of this week, early next week, and that you'll find very interesting. It kind of pulls the problems that we currently have with our existing stations and all that impacts to the fire department and the firefighters, and then shows you what a replacement fire station by 21st century standards really looks like, because the Needham fire chief, he'll review their recently built station, and it gives you a good sense of the before and after. They say picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm thinking this video is going to be worth 1,000,000 words. So listen, thank you all on behalf of the Fire Station Building Committee. Thank you all. Thank you, Jeff, Mike, for hosting us. This has been recorded. It will be available, and we appreciate the interest and support of the community. Mike, if you can hear me, that is a wrap.
Sorry, you're muted again.
Okay, I'll end it now. Thank you.
Sorry, it's page 13. Show a photograph of
It might just be the image, but